Welcome to a play-by-play review. I am your host Henry, and finally, it's finally time I can talk about Fire Emblem Three Houses specifically. This has been an episode I've been wanting to make for a while now. It's just that as if you've listened to my NFL recap videos over the past couple weeks or the past few NFL recap episodes that I've released before this, if you're listening to this, like months after I post it, I've just been dealing with a lot of stuff that has prevented me from being able to record even just an episode altogether rather than more than one. And since the NFL ones are kind of time sensitive compared to this, I had to do those first. But now I can talk about Three Houses. I can go on for a while. I'll try and keep this, like at the hour range, as I've been trying to do now, so I don't bore your heads off too much. But yeah, this is I am a huge fan of really the Fire Emblem genre as a whole, or not genre, series of games as a whole, and Three Houses is my favorite one. So I'm gonna just jump kind of straight into it. I'll give some context first, and so this is going to be a story summary, I guess, not necessarily a recap, but I'm going to be discussing the story events of the game all the way through. This is going to be full spoilers. There's no nothing. Like, I'm not holding anything back. This is full spoilers ahead. It's a 60-year-old game at this point, so I know plenty of people haven't played it, but plenty of people have played it at this point. So it's like, if you know what Three Houses is, chances are you probably know most of what happens in the story. If not, go play it. It's a really fun game. I would highly recommend it. But this podcast isn't going anywhere. But yeah, no, this will be a full story spoiler summary. Nice alliteration there, of Three Houses. So a couple. Well, let me first, before I go into specific context, just for those who have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to Fire Emblem Three Houses, I'll give a little bit of backstory on what the game is. So Fire Emblem is a game series made by Nintendo, so the creators of the Game Boy, NES, GameCube, Wii, Switch, that company. The guys who make Mario also. It is a strategy game with low fantasy, I'd say, setting where it's largely medieval, largely European as a whole, a little bit of magic, a little bit of you have some dragons here and there, or a race of people who have elf-like pointed ears, and who can turn into dragons. In most Fire Emblem games, they're referred to as Manicheets. In Three Houses, they have a different name. I'll get to that in a bit. But yeah, it's sort of a low fantasy, Middle Ages kind of strategy game where it's gameplay wise, I can describe it best as really advanced looking chess with vibrant looking characters. That's what I can say with a system that's based in rock paper scissors. I can also say that. I won't go into details about the gameplay because that could be a whole other episode. And I'm not the most qualified to talk about the nitty gritty of all the gameplay of the various Fire Emblem games. But anyway, it's not really all that relevant to the story because this is the gameplay is out of universe, stories in universe. But anyway, Fire Emblem has been a game that has, I think, 16 mainline games now. I think Three Houses is the 15th one. Most of them were released in Japan only. A lot of the early ones were Japan only, and a lot of them were older, to say the least. A lot of people are still waiting on some of those releases, like Genealogy of the Holy War, which is very highly praised by those who have played fan translations, or those who have just played the Japanese version, but still haven't gotten Genealogy of the Holy War yet. It's, I think, the fourth game that came out in the series. But after the release of Fire Emblem Awakening in 2013, it sort of revitalized the franchise, gave it a new identity, and brought it to the West a lot more Three Houses came out in 2019 for the Switch, the first mainline Fire Emblem game that comes out on the Switch. It releases to critical acclaim and commercial acclaim. It sold like hotcakes. It was incredibly successful. Now, in the Fire Emblem fandom specifically, it's a bit more divisive, mostly in the gameplay aspect, because it deviates a bit from a lot of the standard Fire Emblem tropes and a lot of the you could say the quote unquote Fire Emblem formula. It deviates a lot from that, both in terms of the gameplay and the story. I would actually say I prefer Three Houses style overall compared to most of the other games. I do think gameplay wise, it's not the crispest one or the most crisp game out there. But again, this is kind of me just going on a little bit of tangent here. But the TLDR is Three Houses was a kind of a different game compared to most Fire Emblem games in terms of the content of it, but it was very highly received for what it was. A huge part of that was the story and world building, which is what I'm dedicating this episode to, because it is absolutely fantastic. Like, it's just incredibly good. Like the world that Three Houses built, like the writers behind Three Houses, what they built was absolutely fascinating, and there's just so much content to it, even beyond the game itself. And I would say I would hope they go back to it. Like when I was originally planning this episode like a month ago, I was going to, be like, I really want Nintendo to go back to the world of Fodlan and Three Houses because, it's got so much story to tell. But with the announcement a couple weeks ago in the Nintendo Direct of Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, they haven't officially confirmed it, but it's like basic. Well, they haven't officially confirmed it with like saying, hey, this takes place in the same, like a spokesperson hasn't shown up and said, hey, this takes place in the same world as Three Houses. But considering there is a major character who was shown at the end of the trailer, who was also a major character in the Three Houses games, and since the Three Houses, or not Three Houses game, they're just one Three Houses game, but in Three Houses, there is, it is completely separate from all the other Fire Emblem games. It's like, it's confirmed that we're going back to Fodlan, which is the main. I'll get to that in a second. But yeah, I'm very hyped for Fortune's Weave, and I could make a whole episode theorizing about what we're going to see in that. But that's not this episode. Anyways, that's sort of the general, like, what Three Houses is. It's one of the most successful games in the Fire Emblem franchise, and now I'll get to some more specifics about it or some context for the story before I begin. So first concerns the character of Byleth. So beginning with Fire Emblem Awakening and going through all the games since, Nintendo has made it so you have a sort of player character or avatar that you control. More so in Three Houses and the game after Engage, rather than Awakening and Fates. But it's sort of the player stand-in. And they're also a very important character. So I'm going to use they, them pronouns for Byleth, not because they're non-binary. It's kind of the opposite. It's more that Byleth as a player character, you can, starting the game, you can choose whether to play as a male or female version of the character, depending on your preference. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, you can choose either one. You don't have to be a guy and like pick the male Byleth option, but it's anyway. I'm using they, them because it's easier to say than he or she for when I'm talking about Byleth in the course, in the process of the story. It's just easier to shorten it to they rather than he or she. Not because they're non-binary. I mean, you can headcanon Byleth as non-binary, but that's entirely headcanon. It's just you can choose them as male or female to start the game. So like some people may have only played the game using male Byleth. Some people may have only played with female Byleth. I've played through both, and there's some gameplay differences in there, but that, again, not relevant to this episode. But it's basically, that's why I will be calling Byleth they when I discuss in the story. Because again, it could be he or she depending on the player choice. Byleth is sort of, I'd say the main character, one of the main characters in the story. So you'll be hearing a lot of them coming up. The other kind of main thing I want to address before I get into the story is one more game, Fire Emblem Warriors Three Hopes. It is a spin-off that takes place in the Three Houses universe that came out a couple years after. It is non-canon, like the story events that happen are non-canon compared to the main story. But the game does provide a lot of context for like historical events and a lot of various lore details that can go hand in hand with both games. I usually tend to think that they are canon, despite the game's story events being non-canon. It's just that they're they add a lot more context to stuff that exists, and like the context doesn't like conflict with anything we know in base Three Houses. So it's like the story events that happen in Warriors Three Hopes are their own separate timeline, basically. But the context that they like various lore implications that that the game introduces can also be applied to Three Houses without any issue. That I think that's the only other major point of interest I want to address going into this. I won't be going over the stories of Three Hopes in this video, or not video, in this episode, mostly because I haven't done all three routes yet. I've only done two of the three, so I don't have like the best knowledge to recount that. And also, A, make this episode really confusing if I did it both in one, and B, probably make this like 4 hours long. But so I'm not going to do that. Maybe I might say that for another episode, but yeah. Let me just take a sip of water real quick. So with that lengthy preamble that I didn't really mean to go for 11 minutes, but oh well. We're here now. We'll jump right in to the story of Fire Emblem Three Houses. So the game is set in the land of Fodlan. It is, you can call it a continent, you could call it a nation, a country. It's kind of this sort of peninsular region that is largely divided up into three, I guess, regions within it. It's got basically the bottom half of it is the region of Adrestia, which is sort of I wouldn't really necessarily the major region, but it gets a bit more love, I'd say, than the other two. In the top left is the region of Fargus. Technically, there are two regions within Fargus, but I don't really need to worry about that too much. That it's really, you just need to know Fargus is kind of the top left. And then top right is the region of Leicester. Same name as the region in England of Leicester, or Leicester if you're Ted Lasso. And as I go into specifics about Leicester, if you've read King Lear, like if you're a Shakespeare buff, you might recognize a lot of the names. And like the writers, at least I don't know if it was the original Japanese or just the English localization, but they took a lot of names from the play of King Lear for the Leicester characters, the major characters in that region. So if if you're listening to this and you're like, you've read King Lear before, you might, and you're going like, hey, I recognize like half those names. That's why. I don't think there was really any like specific symbolism they did for it. I think it was just kind of like something they wanted to do. Anyway. So Fodlan, which is where like 95% of the story takes place. It's at some point, in time, like long 1,000+ years before the start of the story. There's humans live in Fodland, and one day a woman named Sothis, who is a Nabatean. Nabatean is the Three Houses equivalent of a Manakete. They have their main characteristics are that they have green hair, matching color eyes, pointy ears like a fantasy elf. They're also immortal, very powerful, and can turn into a dragon or something draconic like. We know as the audience, we have seen only 3 official Nabatean transformations. One of them is just kind of like your typical dragon. Another one's more of like almost like a griffin, or in a sense. I mean, it's like it has draconic features, but it looks more along the lines of a griffin than I'd say, or like some kind of beast like that in look rather than your typical dragon. And then the third is almost more of like a giant turtle, but with a dragon head, rather than a dragon itself. Like it didn't have wings. So it's Nabateans they're not just like, they can't just transform into a normal dragon. At least what we've seen, they have like different forms and all that. But that's not like super relevant, but that's just something like I find kind of interesting. Anyway, Sothis, who becomes known as the progenitor god, she descends upon Fodlan, originally thought to be from space, like just from outer space. We don't actually know where she comes from. She just kind of shows up at some point, and like it could just be from somewhere else on like in the world. It could be from space. Who knows? But she shows up and makes Fodlan her new home. She basically gives birth to a number of children directly, who become known as the children of the goddess. They're also Nabateans. And they also, give birth to other children as well. So the Nabateans start to grow in number, and they start to mingle with the humans. A lot of Nabateans, from what I can tell, start to become like nobles or like major rulers in ancient Fodland. And so a thing with, just to deviate real quick to a little bit of speculate, I won't speculate too much on Fortune's Weave, but there is a character who looks to be Nabatean, who seems to be running the show in the trailers. So that could be a member of the Children of the Goddess, because it looks like Fortune's Weave is a prequel to Three Houses. So that is where this could stem from. Anyways, so Sothis and her kids, the Nabateans, they kind of usher in a new wave of humanity. They share their knowledge with humanity, and as such, humanity's civilization grows and becomes known as Agartha. It flourishes all over Fodlan, and the Agarthans become very, very technologically advanced, like not fantasy wise. Like from what we've seen so just skipping ahead real quick, the Agarthan civilization remnants that we see during the events of the game over 1,000 years later have technology like Tesla coils, giant robots. The best thing I can describe this as is intercontinental ballistic missiles powered by magic, body snatching techniques, teleportation, a lot of dark magic stuff. It's like dark magic, magic tech. It's kind of neat it's very unique for a Fire Emblem game. But yeah, and that's like the remnants of their technology. So it's presumably like at their peak, they're like very modern compared to what we see in like any Fire Emblem game. Again, my last note to Fortune's Weave, I'll stop talking about that because we don't know too much about it, but we do see a character with basically what looks to be a gun in Fortune's Weave for like a second. So that's probably a Garthan technology, because I don't think anyone else is making a gun at this point in time. Anyways, TLDR, Garthans are pretty smart, and they make some highly advanced tech, while the Nabateans kind of oversee as their rulers in a sense, with Sothis at the top as the goddess. A lot of Agarthans over time they aren't exactly great people. The Agarthans and their descendants are the main villains of Three Houses. And a lot of them basically believe Sothis is a false god or false goddess, however you want to say it. And they basically despise everything to do with the Nabateans. And so they do plan and then eventually go through with a revolt against Sothis using their what they call javelins of light, which are the magic ICBMs, to wipe out a number of various settlements all over Fodlan, both human and Nabatean. This starts a war between the Agarthans and the Nabateans, mainly Sothis, which would culminate in a valley known as Aelel, where Sothis would basically rain hellfire literally down upon the Agarthans and just wipe like most of them, like probably 90% of them, just gone completely. Wipes them out, wipes out most of humanity because, again, humanity and Garthans are the same thing. So basically, Sophis kind of just nukes the planet, nukes Fodlan. ALL specifically becomes this volcanic wasteland that remains to the point like 1,000 years later. It is a map that you play in the game where it is like fire everywhere. It just sucks. It's literally just known as the Valley of Torment because it was just destroyed. Because Sothis is very, very, well, was, because this takes place in the past, very, very powerful. After this, Sothis decides to basically repopulate the world with humans to make up for this massive loss that she caused during the war. In doing so, Sothis uses a ton of her power, like just completely drains her, and she literally falls into a coma. Like she is out of commission for a long time. And so her kids and the Nabateans as a whole, they take her and basically put her in a stasis chamber that eventually gets known as the Holy Tomb, which you'll see why in a bit. But she basically gets put in a coma and just gets told to rest. And its location is basically right in the center of Fodlan in a series of mountains. And I'll get to what gets built on top of that later. But yeah, basically Sothis is kind of taking a long nap in her little tomb in the center of Fodlan, and the Nabateans build a civilization known as Xanadu in a canyon or a series of canyons basically right next door. So this is kind of, things settle down for a moment. The few survivors of the Agarthans literally go underground. Like they tunnel underground and build a giant city known as Shambhala underneath the earth and hide out there planning their revenge. And give me one sec to take another sip so my throat doesn't get too super scratchy. But the Agarthans, after seeing everything that happened, they decide to, similar to what the Sith do in Star Wars, they go from open conflict to working from the shadows and trying to influence things from without having to directly involve themselves. Their first major step is that they locate a man that we only know as Nemesis. We don't know any other names for him. That's the only name he's ever been called. Nemesis is a thief at this point in his life. Just kind of going around doing thieving things. I don't know. He's just kind of doing it. So what we see of Nemesis in the few cutscenes we see of him, he is absolutely massive. Like he's, I'm pretty sure like might be 7 feet tall. I actually want to look this up real quick. But he is absurdly tall and just extremely buff. Like he is ridiculously large, and I think that was kind of like part of the reason why I was like the Agarthan scene is like, hey, this guy is just an absolute mountain of a man. And they're like, hey, we should probably recruit this guy. Okay, so he's 6'6" in height and like about as wide as well. Like think Arnold Schwarzenegger, like Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime levels of muscle, standing at 6'6". He's absolutely massive. And so they see this, the Agarthans see this guy and they're like, hey, we should probably recruit this guy. He can, do something. So they do that. They bring him to, or they recruit Nemesis into their schemes, and what they do for him is that he somehow, by the way, again, remember his size. He somehow sneaks into the Holy Tomb. Disclaimer here, a little bit of graphic imagery coming up. I'll try not to make it like too terrible, but some graphic imagery. But at some point, Nemesis sneaks into the Holy Tomb and murders Sothis in her sleep. He then, with the help of the Agarthans, uh, takes her bones, and they turn her bones into a sword, known as the Sword of the Creator, which is the weapon that Byleth will eventually wield later. So if you ever seen Byleth, just a picture of them or like them in Smash Bros, their like whip sword that they have. That is the Sword of the Creator. Why it like looks bony is because it is literal bones. I'm pretty sure the blade is Sothis' spinal column. Um, they also Nemesis and the Agarthans also take her heart and turn it into something known as a crest stone, which is basically a battery for the weapon, for the Sword of the Creator. It's known as a hero's relic, or gets known as a hero's relic. I will explain why soon. But you can basically stick the crest stone into the relic, and it gets even more powerful. And the crest stones themselves also just offer a ton of power, since they're literally the hearts of the Nabateans, and they just hold a ton of power with that. Finally, Nemesis takes some of Sothis's blood. Don't know exactly how. Could drink it. Could just like scoop it up and rub it over him. We don't know how. But it presumably extends his life, because that seems to be a thing where like if a human is able to take Nabatean blood, they will gain extended life. Don't know if it's immortal or not, but like just pure immortality, but it is extended life. It also grants them what's known as a crest, which is, how do I explain this? Basically, every Nabatean crest, because I'll get to more of them in a sec, has like their own emblem. Sothis's emblem is known as the Crest of Flames. And it basically just gets imprinted into basically the genetic code of whoever takes that blood. So Nemesis gains Sothis's Crest of Flames, and that also allows him to utilize the Sword of the Creator to its fullest extent without it like basically killing him. And I guess that's the best way I can describe it. So after this, Nemesis, with his new super weapon, finds a bunch of his thieving buddies and lures them in with a promise of power, and marches them into Xanadu and massacres basically all the Nabateans there. And his Nemesis's fellow humans, they basically do the same thing to the Nabateans there what he did with Sothis, where they take the bones, they take the heart, they take the blood, and create heroes relics. I turned into Elmer Fudd there for a sec. Heroes relics with crest stones, and then so what some of these guys become known as the 10 elites. There are technically 11 of them at this point, but they become known as the 10 elites, each of them with a different crest, which I'll go over later as I get to some of the characters that you can play or recruit in the 3 different routes four actually in 3 houses. But basically it's you get a bunch of superpowered humans with draconic blood in them, with bone weapons that are very, very powerful. All led by Nemesis and kind of being controlled in the shadows by the Agarthans. So that event is known as the Red Canyon Tragedy, with all but like basically a handful of Nabateans surviving. They go into hiding, and at that point, the 10 elites and Nemesis, who becomes known as the King of Liberation because he is trying to liberate the world from the Nabateans, they basically take over Fodlan and start ruling various territory under the 10 elites and Nemesis. They largely control Leicester and Fargus territories, while Adressia is a bit more not as under control, and that becomes a problem for them as over the next 40 odd years after the Red Canyon tragedy, one of the few surviving Nabateans, known as Saros, who is a direct daughter of Sothis, she would pop up in Enbar, which is the largest city of the Adrestia region. And she would basically start performing miracles and doing various holy things to just kind of, do some good in the world while she is grieving of her loss. Over the next 40-ish years or so, we have a little bit of a timeline here that we know in game. Saros's miracles would grow a massive following, and her followers would create the Church of Saros in her name. And the Church of Saros would start growing in influence, mostly in the Adrestia region, and eventually in the year, in what the calendar that is used in game, in the year 1, essentially. Everything before that is like in the negatives, so it's kind of think of it kind of like BC AD. The reason why is that in the year 1, Saros would meet a man known as Wilhelm Paul Hresfelg. Hresfelg and Saros would form a close bond. Saros would even share her blood with Wilhelm, and he would gain the crest of Saros because of it, willingly, not through what the 10 elites and Nemesis did of, the whole murder thing. And so this is my one thing of like the whole blood sharing and whatnot with Nabateans, is that I don't know if Wilhelm was immortal or if I think he just had an extended lifespan. I'm pretty sure that's what happened, but they don't really say that. But anyway, he has Saros blood in him. He has naturally inherits her crest because of it, because that's what happens. Or that is a thing that can happen when you share blood. Somehow, again, we don't know exactly how, but it's just a thing that happens. And Wilhelm at this point founds the Adrestian Empire, with him becoming the first emperor of Adrestia. With the Church of Saros backing them, they would eventually, a couple decades later, declare war on Nemesis and his 10 elites to unify Fodlan and remove him from power. And so again, the reason why it's year 1 when Saros and Wilhelm meet is because that is the year that the Adrestian Empire is founded. So that's why it's year 1, because it's the imperial calendar that the game uses, since the Empire would becomes a major force throughout the entire game. So in year 32, the War of the Heroes officially starts between the Church, the Empire and Church against the forces of the King of Liberation, and that war would last for a while. Saros would be able to recruit 4 other surviving Nabateans. Indek, who is who we know is the Griffin kind of draconic griffin that I mentioned earlier. Macule, who is the turtle dragon, I guess, from that I mentioned earlier. Keyhole, who we don't know of, or we don't know his transformation, but he's kind of the chief strategist. And then his daughter Sethleen, who we also don't know her transformation, but she's a young healer type, basically. So the 4 of them would become known as the 4 Saints, and they would become major figures within the Church of Saros canon as the years would go on. But they would, along with Saros and Wilhelm, lead the charge in the War of Heroes. So in year 46, the Battle of Gronderfield would happen, and that was a major battle where the Imperial army would emerge victorious over Nemesis's forces, and that's mostly relevant because for what happens later during the events of the game, where another Gronderfield is this ceremonial area that honors one of the a major battle in the War of Heroes that was like one of the first key victories that the Adrestian Empire had. Anyway, at some point during the war, the 11th elite, so to say, a guy known as Maurice, he would like basically just go insane from his crest powers and transform into this like demonic beast that would basically just wander forests aimlessly for the next 1,000+ years. And his name basically just got scrubbed out of history out of it, with his crest only becoming known as the Crest of the Beast, which is considered a curse by all those who wear it or who inherit it, not wear it. And that's a little relevant for later for one of the characters later. And I'll explain a little bit more of how I want to handle the actual events or the events of the Three Houses story itself once we get there, because it's a little tricky. But anyway, that's just like one other event that happens. And so at that point, it goes from 11 to 10 elites, and the 10 elites are what eventually get known as throughout the rest of history. Anyway, in the year 91 of the Imperial calendar, the last major battle of the War of Heroes takes place, the Battle of Tailtean Plains. And so the said Tailtean Plains are in the Fargus territory, I believe. And it's this massive battle between both forces. And when you start a new save file in Three Houses, I believe it is the first thing you ever see. The first cutscene you see is the end of the Battle of Tailtean Plains, where Seiros and Nemesis come face to face in combat, and Seiros eventually kills Nemesis, avenging her mother, but and also everyone else, all the other Nabateans at Xanadu, though she is definitely not over it, and definitely not. The revenge was definitely not her coping mechanism, so to speak. Seiros is not able to get over the loss of her mother that easily. But that's for later. For at this point, with Nemesis dead, the 10 elites quickly get rounded up, and they all get executed for their crimes as well, though their children are spared, and therefore the descendants of the 10 elites continue on. But not too long after the War of Heroes ends with a complete Adrestian victory, Nemesis and his forces are completely wiped out, and the Agarthans at this point basically just go back underground to Shambhala to regroup and figure out what they want to do next. So after this, or through this, Seiros, who is a major power at this point with the Church of Seiros, she kind of starts rewriting history in a sense and creates her own events through the lens of the church. And basically what is taught in history in as the years go on in over the course of the like 1,000+ years going through the events of the game. Instead of, well, basically Seiros eliminates all records of Nabateans existing, because I think she just wants to protect the memory and also those who are left. Instead, she kind of has it, and I don't remember, my memory's a little fuzzy on this, but she basically explains that Nemesis was this king who led all of Fodlan at one point, with the 10 elites as his subordinates. He would eventually fall to corruption and brand himself the King of Liberation, taking the 10 elites with him in the Fargus and Leicester territories. Emperor Wilhelm would rise up as in opposition, and with Seiros and the church at its backing, and they would fight with Nemesis eventually falling. And the 10 elites would surrender, and they would basically, their descendants would form noble houses in the Fargus and Leicester territories, and the Empire would instead, or the Empire would control everything for a while. So it's, I think my explanation is not the best there, but basically her revision of history kind of eliminates any mention of the Nabateans and instead just kind of makes it an entire human issue, um, and reframes the elites and Nemesis as less of like thieves who stole Nabatean identity, and instead they were like always noble, like they always had noble lineage, and like their crests and their weapons were like they had always been in their families, and that like all of their like any Nabatean identity with them just didn't exist. I think the reason why Saros wanted to keep the Ten Elites around, uh, or like their bloodlines around. This is just my opinion. I think it's just because they were like, even though they were murderers of her people, they still kept the blood of her people in like with them physically. So like their descendants for some of the names. So like Gloucester, Blathid, um, Goneril, some of them, though, like all of them were had crests of slain Nabateans, so it's like they still have the memory of those Nabateans, and even the weapons that have some of the Nabatean bones. So I think it's that like Saros wanted to keep at least somewhat of a memory of her, probably brothers and sisters around, even if like she um, erased the memory of them from greater history. Although again, I think that's more for protecting the memory of them for herself. Anyways, that was kind of a little bit of a ramble on, but this area of history, this early area of history, is very dense, and so there's a lot to kind of cover. Um, at some point, not long after the War of Heroes ends, Wilhelm kind of records his own perspective of the entire war, which gets passed through his specific family, the Hresvelg line, and that becomes important later on. But we'll get to Edelgard in a little bit because she is one of the major characters. Um, so after the War of the Heroes, Adrestia now controls all of Fodland officially. The Ten Elites, their descendants, basically formed noble houses in Fargus and Leicester under the rule of Adrestia. But so everything's kind of all together. Saros at this point disappears from life, and but the church lives on. Around 100-ish years after the war, the Garrigmach Monastery is created in in central Fodland, and it is built on top of the Holy Tomb where Saros had, or not Saros, where Sothis had been killed. It's a little annoying how there's Saros and Sothis being like mother and daughter and like very similar characters in terms of backstory and like very similar names. But Sothis, her resting, the Holy Tomb, basically becomes part of the basement of the monastery, and that becomes the headquarters of the Church of Saros for the entire, like, from then on, basically. With I think at this point Saros was still around, maybe, or at least a version. So a little bit of spoilers ahead. Saros, who again is immortal because she's Nabatean, she remains as the Archbishop of the Church of Saros through the next 1,000+ years, presumably under different identities. I would think she basically just like restyles her hair, maybe does a little bit of makeup, and like puts on a fake mustache every like 50 or so years. But it's Saros or a not even a version of her, and a different identity of her controls the church, like for the next 1,000+ years, and oversees everything that happens there. She at some point during this time uh, takes the sword of the creator and buries it in what becomes known as a tomb of Saros, which is down. I think it's actually the holy tomb where Sothis is actually buried. Um, but so it's she buries the sword and well, no, she actually doesn't bury the crest stone. She takes the crest stone for something else. Um, but she buries the sword in the holy tomb, seemingly never to be seen again because she just kind of wants to forget about it. She does keep the crest stone of her mother Sothis around because she devises plans to try and revive or resurrect her mother through various means that never come to fruition over the next 1,000-ish years. So that's kind of in like the year 180. So the year 185 is when the monastery gets formed, and nothing like major of note, at least for what I want to cover, happens for the next like 600 years or so. Um, there's like various political events that happen, but for the most part, um, not too much happens. One other thing I almost forgot to mention is, well, actually, two things I forgot to mention. One is that Saros, after the church is established and becomes the main religion of Fodlan, she basically forcibly halts like technological expansion, and like keeps it in that sort of medieval tech era, because of the trauma she and the rest of the Nabateans experienced due to the Agarthans. So she doesn't want another Agartha. Whether this is right or wrong is up to interpretation. One major thing that has come out of Three Houses is discourse surrounding Saros, who later becomes known as Rhea, and Edelgard, and a lot of their motivations because they're very complex characters. But anyway, I'll get more into them later. The other thing I just wanted to note is that I'm using FireEmblemWiki.org for a lot of this. They have a handy dandy timeline that I can use as a reference, or that I am using as a reference. I will flex that I do know a decent bit of the timeline off the top of my head. But you know, I don't need to do this until all from memory. I can do this using actual notes. This is still unscripted, as are all of my episodes, but this I am using more than just my memory for this. I'm going to take a sip of water here. But yeah, those are my little points that I wanted to get in before I forgot. Next up, the next major event is in 747, the Fargus Rebellion. So a man by the name of Lug von Blathid, who at that point was the ruler of House Blathid, one of the a descendant of one of the 10 elites, and therefore a noble and head of the House of Blathid in Fargus. He would rise up or lead a rebellion in the Fargus and Leicester territories, actually, against Adrastia. And this is, now I'm going to use a little bit of lore from Three Hopes specifically, because I know this is stuff that was introduced in Three Hopes, but he would have another descendant of the Ten Elites, Kaifon von Fraldarius. Fraldarius being the house and the 10 elite name. Same with Blathid. So Kaifon would align with him as another noble house, and he was like, the two would become very good friends, and Kaifon would be like his bodyguard and like chief fighter, basically, for Lug, who would become the future king of Fargus. They would also have a mysterious strategist known as Pan. It's suggested that Pan is or was a member of, or was an Agarthan, or an Agarthan descendant. That's never confirmed. That's just kind of speculation that the game hints at. But it goes in line with Agarthan doctrine in this like 1,000-year stretch after the War of Heroes, where they basically from the shadows cause a lot of political turmoil to try and destabilize Fodlan as a whole. and leading a rebellion, a successful rebellion at that, is certainly in line with Agarthan strategy. Anything else about that, we don't know, but that is something that is hinted at, and I think is pretty in line with what we know about everything lore wise. So, a couple years after the rebellion starts, Lug would emerge victorious with the help of the Church of Saros, since the church and the empire over the centuries would kind of grow apart a little bit, I'd say. And so when Lug and his forces emerged, or were able to win enough to the point where they could feasibly, split from Adrestia and like not encounter any more opposition, the church would support this, and they would. They made a deal where they would officially recognize Fargus as the Holy Kingdom of Fargus, but in turn, the church would have to be the official religion, which I think like it was never. There was like never made in any writing for Adrestia to have the church as its official religion, and I think that was like a reason why the two sides would eventually kind of grow apart over the centuries, while Fargus would officially be a holy kingdom. Like it is a land that is not just secular. Like it is a religious based land, and so that it encompasses both the Fargus and Leicester territories. So like the top half of Fodlan basically splits off and becomes the Holy Kingdom of Fargus. About 50 or so years later, the Crescent Moon War happens, and this is another rebellion within the Fargus territory. And there's a lot of information that gets mostly revealed in Three Hopes about some of the stuff that happens in this. I don't remember all of it off the top of my head, and it's not like super relevant, but it's basically like a lot of like different like princes of the kingdom wanting to like vying for the throne, and there's like some assassinations probably spurred on by the Agarthans, and then there's like this big power vacuum and power struggle, but eventually the Leicester territory would split off from the Fargus territory and form its own rebellion, and eventually get to the point where they would form the the Leicester Alliance, becoming the third major faction in Fodlan. One little geographical thing to note about Fodlan is that Leicester and Fargus are split between the middle by a large mountain range, with it at the bottom being where the monastery is located. And then basically below that is all of Adrestia. Adrestia and Leicester are separated by a massive river. I think it's called the Aramid River. Whereas Fargus and Adrestia on like the left side of Garrigmach, the monastery, I think there is also a river, but it's like not nearly as big. There's not, that border there is a bit more fluid, I'd say, or a lot more open. But that's why like the borders between these three territories, or these three factions, are pretty set in stone, and also tend to be pretty tough to traverse through. But anyway, in the Leicester Rebellion happens, and over the next like almost like 100 years or so, basically, the rebellion happens, and eventually the Leicester territory gets formed as the Leicester Alliance. So that ends in the year 901. And for reference, the start of the game happens in the year 1180. So we're getting close. Next major event is the Almiran invasion. The Almiran invasion. Almira is a country or continent territory, basically directly to the east of Fodlan. It is connected by land to the Leicester territories, and what little we know of Almira is that it's kind of a more desert then Fodlan's kind of a bit more foresty and more like grasslands, forests, and all that, whereas Elmira is more arid, desert-like. The culture there seems to be a bit more Middle Eastern inspired compared to Fodlan's European inspired. And while Elmira isn't like super relevant to the story, it's a little important, and they try to invade Fodland through their border with Leicester, but the combined forces of Fodland are able to block it off or repel the invasion. And later on, I think like a couple hundred years later, it might be actually, but later on, basically, the Alliance would construct an entire fortress wall, basically, at the like choke point between Leicester and Elmira, and that becomes like a major focus for the Alliance to maintain that position. But it's one of the many invasion attempts by Elmira. A thing that it's kind of seen as that, or that it's kind of developed over the course of the story, is that Elmira just really likes fighting. They're just kind of in it for the love of the game. And so they just kind of send invasion waves every so often to Fodland, and sometimes it can really mess up the geopolitics of Fodland. But Elmira's pretty fun. I like their nation a lot. It's, from what little we've seen, it's just a real vibe, to be honest. But also, so in response to this invasion specifically in 961, the whatever name Saros is going for or using at this point, she creates the Officers Academy at Garrigmach, which basically is this like, I guess I can say it's like high school or college for various important figures in the three factions to like send their like teenage and like young adult kids to this academy to go like learn how to be a better commander, essentially, like learn how to fight wars better, is what I can basically say. And so what's relevant about the Officers Academy is that where the first half of the game, that's where it all takes place. That like your Byleth eventually teaches there, but I'll get to that later. But the Officers Academy is very important there. So after that, not too much happens for the next like 150 years or so, even like 200 years. At some point, relatively close to the start of the game, Saros would adopt the name of Rhea, and she would rule as the Archbishop as the most recent Archbishop, basically. But basically, from now on, I'm going to be referring to Saros as Rhea because that's what we see of her in game. But so Rhea is in control of the church, and the three territories, you could say the three houses actually, of Adrestia, Fargus, and Leicester are in a tense but relatively stable position at the moment. So now we start to get into a little bit more specific stuff, and I realize I've gone on for a lot already. Like I'm already up to almost an hour, but again, I'll try and go quick. And because a lot of this historical stuff was like a bit more rambly, whereas a lot of the stuff as we get along, get closer to the games, it's a bit more specific, and I can go through a bit more quickly. So in the year 1159, Byleth is born, and their birth is a bit odd, to say the least. So Byleth's mother, Citri, is a nun at the church. Citri is not a natural human being. Instead, she was physically created by Rhea as the 12th attempt to basically resurrect her mother, Sothis. How Rhea did this was that, so don't know like all the specifics, but we know that, so like we don't know if Citri was like a person who was born and then was like transformed into this vessel, or if like there are some other shenanigans going on. But basically, what we know is that Citri has, Rhea took Sothis's crest stone, her like solidified heart, basically, and stuck it to Citri's heart, essentially. Um, and this made Citri like really distant and like non-emotional, and also really frail. She would eventually give birth to Byleth in the year 1159 after falling in love with a knight of Saros named Geralt. Geralt, who years before, might actually be centuries before, saved Rhea's life at some point. She would give Geralt a bit of her blood to save him from a mortal injury. Geralt gained increased lifespan and loyalty to Rhea because of it. And while he was working as a knight of Saros, he met Citri, fell in love, had Byleth. Byleth was born basically stillborn, and Citri basically pleaded with Rhea to take the crest stone inside of her and give it to Byleth instead. This, in doing so, led to Citri's death, which Citri knew of. She knew she would have to give her life to save her unborn child, which she was completely willing to do. Rhea was begrudgingly accepted this and saved Byleth's life at the cost of Citri's. Geralt, who was not happy about this, and who knew some of this but not all of what happened, he basically used a fire at the church as a distraction to take Byleth and leave. Geralt would then form his own mercenary company and wander Fodlan as a mercenary while raising his child as his own. Well, on his own, not as his own. It is his child. But yeah, Geralt is raising baby Byleth. Byleth would grow to, as they grew up, they would have no heartbeat, have a very like just completely deadpan demeanor. Like they had basically no emotions, literally no heartbeat because their heart has a crest stone on it. Like basically like as a tumor, essentially. That's like feeding off of their heart almost. It's not like doing damage, I think, but it's like it's causing some issues essentially. But Byleth growing up under Geralt becomes known as the Ashen Demon. They become stupidly strong as a mercenary. I think they're like 21 at the start of the story, and they're already like one of the strongest characters in existence in Fodlan. Like they are just ridiculously good at fighting. But anyway, 3 years later, in 1162, Edelgard von Hraesvelg, the latest in the Hraesvelg line, is born. She is one of the main characters. Along with this, Dmitri Alexander Blaiddyd is born in the Holy Kingdom of Fargus as the Crown Prince of the Holy Kingdom. And then a man known as Khalid is born in Elmira. We will know him better as Claude von Regan, and we'll get a little bit more to him in a second. But the three of them become the three house leaders once time for the game starts, essentially. But they're three of them very important characters. Basically, the three of them and Byleth are those four of them are like the main characters of the story. Not long after, a couple years after, Saint Keyhole, one of the few Nabateans remaining, he would return to the church. One thing I forgot to mention about him and Sethline, his daughter. During the War of the Heroes, Sethline would basically use a ton of her magic power to heal her allies. She would fall into a coma, nearly dying as a result. Keyhole would take her and basically go into hiding so he could watch over her and make sure she lives. Presumably this takes about like 1,000 years because at this point, Keyhole and Sethline return to Garreg Mach, now under the guises of Sedith for Keyhole and Flayn for Sethline, and they say they're brother-sister rather than father-daughter. Anyways, so a couple years after this, when all the main characters are pretty young, Edelgard's mother, Anselma, is exiled from the Empire due to political strife. She would flee to the Kingdom of Fargus, where she would befriend a mage known as Cornelia Arnim. Now, Cornelia, who is a very powerful and very benevolent mage, she would be in the kingdom when a massive plague ravages the entire area. It would wind up killing Dimitri's mother and among many, many others. Cornelia would be able to cure the plague, but not long after, the Agarthans would show up and kill her and then body snatch her. How the body snatching process works, we don't know. All we do know is that an Agarthan or descendant of the Agarthans, don't know like if they're immortal or not. I don't think they are, but it's well, I'm just gonna say Agarthan in this case. They are able to basically use magic to disguise themselves as the person they have body snatched. Although they can also revert back to their original form, which is like completely white skin compared to like normal like pale tan skin that normal humans have. Because again, Agarthans have been living underground for the past 1,000 years. But anyway, Cornelia gets body snatched by an Agarthan named I'm gonna try to pronounce it. It's Cleobulus, I think. Apparently, it's like this Greek, or it's a reference to like this Greek mythological figure, or part of a pantheon. Like a lot of the major Agarthans in the story are like have their names referencing this pantheon, but I don't know too much about that other than that's just a thing that exists. But the fake Cornelia at this point, she is granted the title of court mage by King Lambert, the king of Fargus and Dimitri's father. And so she starts spreading her own web of deceit in the Holy Kingdom. At this point, Anselma, who adopts the name of Patricia, Anselma being Edelgard's mother, she meets with Lambert and they fall in love, presumably fall in love. I actually don't know for sure, but they marry, or secretly marry. She becomes Lambert's second wife and Dimitri's stepmother. And so that's happening all over there. So in the year 1167, a major event happens known as the Hrym Rebellion. So back in the Empire, Edelgard's, I think it's father. He just looks really old when we see him in the story, but I'm pretty sure it's his father, or I'm pretty sure it's her father or grandfather. I'm pretty sure it's her father. The Emperor Ionius IX. He's ruling. He tries to consolidate more power for himself, which angers a lot of the nobles. A noble house known as House Hrym, spelled Hrym, just for funsies. That house would try to defect to the alliance for fears of the emperor gaining too much power. They would have support from House Ordelia, when a descendant or a 10 elites house basically, and basically they're neighbors right across the Aramid River. In response, the Empire would send in their troops and put down the rebellion rather swiftly and rather brutally. At the end, after the Hrym house is largely wiped out, Duke Ludwig, or I don't know if you would say Ludwig or Ludwig in this case, but I'm going to go with Ludwig because I like the sound of it more. Ludwig von Eyre, who is one of the highest ranking nobles essentially in the empire. He would kind of take over that territory in a sense. Duke Eyre is he's not a good person at all. He's actually a terrible person. And during this time, either don't know if he's specifically sent off the okay for this or not, but House Ordelia, because of their alliance with House Hrym, they kind of got roped into the punishments for losing the rebellion. And so along with imperial forces taking a lot of stuff from Ordelia territory, Agarthan mages would come in as well, and they would start doing their own experiments, largely because Shambhala, their homeland, is located directly under Hrym territory, which is the east, northeast basically of Adrestia. But so Agarthan mages would go into Ordelia territory and basically experiment on all of the Ordelia, the children of the noble house. Mainly using crest experiments in order to try and see if it's possible to have someone with two crests rather than one. Lysithia von Ordelia is the sole survivor of this. She would gain two crests. Both her crest of Ordelia and I think crest. I actually don't remember if they have a crest or not, but two crests. One of them Gloucester. I think one of them Karen. The other one. Anyway, not really important. She gets two crests, but a side effect is that her hair turns white, and she basically gets like crest cancer. Like she has a very limited lifespan because of this. And so she, anyway, we'll get to her a little bit later. She's one of a character you can recruit in the game. But yeah, so that's the gist of it is that, or a thing that's set up through this is that the Agarthans are experimenting to try and put more than one crest in someone for their future plans. A couple years after this, in 1171, the insurrection of the Seven happens, where basically the major houses of Adrestia, so House Burgleys, Hevering, Varley, Vestra, Girth, Ire, and Hrim, all basically launch their coup, or launch a coup against the Emperor Ionius IX. Basically doing the rebellion, but like actually correctly. And they're able to, they don't like kill Ionius or anything like that, but they basically just take over the empire from him, and he basically becomes a figurehead. As a result, Edelgard starts to despise the nobility because of this, because they took away power from her family. And so Volkard von Arundel, who is the head of House Arundel, one of the houses that was kind of not aligned with the insurrection, and someone who was very close to Edelgard. She refers to him as her uncle, I believe. I don't think by blood, but like just like that's how close they were. He would take Edelgard with him to Fargus to flee, basically, and she would spend 3 years there as a refugee. She would spend some time with her stepbrother Dmitri when they were kids. We see a lot of these flashbacks in the Blue Lions, the Dimitri's story path in the actual game. But Edelgard and Dmitri have their own flashbacks, and like, or not, they have their own stories together where they basically befriend each other and have like their own thing together before Edelgard eventually returns to the Empire a few years later. Basically, like around the time Edelgard returns, Lord Arundel is body snatched by the leader of the Agarthans, known as Talus, and because of that, after Edelgard returns, he basically allows Agarthans to come in and start experimenting on Edelgard and all of her siblings, with the support of the noble houses. Basically, they're like, since they took power from the House Fresfelg, they kind of don't really care about what happens to the house later, because they're not really planning on leaving power to that house. So Edelgard and her, like, I think like she has 10 siblings at this point. They get experimented on by the Agarthans to, again, do the whole double crest thing. With Edelgard being the only survivor. Her hair also turns white, but she ends up, along with her crest of Saros, which she inherited from her bloodline, she was also gifted gifted, I should say, not really gifted, more forcibly implanted with the crest of flames, which is Sothis' crest. She does not get the crest cancer because the Agarthans have perfected their double crest giving technique at this point, but she is not exactly happy with this whole thing. And Edelgard actually blamed the Church of Saros for this, because she despises crests and the whole system of crests, that is propagated by the church, because the nobility system in Fodlan is at this point entirely based on if you have a crest or not. Like those without crests are considered commoners, whereas those with crests are considered those of a noble house. Since all of them are descendant of Nabateans in one way or another, which is why Rhea created these noble houses, or like or allowed these bloodlines to become nobility. It's because, in my opinion, I think at least, is that Rhea wants to, have the memory of her brothers and sisters be that of nobility rather than death. Anyways, so at this point, Edelgard is her hatred of the church is growing rapidly. The church and the nobility as a whole is growing rapidly with everything that has happened in her life. Not long after, there's the Brigid and Dagda War. Dagda is this continent like southwest of Fodlan that we don't really see much of. We only really know one character that comes from it named Shamir, who is a mercenary we see in the game. It's not like super important in terms of the story, but that's that. We don't know too much about Dagda. Brigid is this like series of islands off the coast of Adrestia that's kind of in the middle of Fodlan and Dagda, and they would try and invade Adrestia, which failed. And Brigid's princess, Petra McNeary, she would basically be held in the Empire as a political prisoner. Although she would actually befriend Edelgard, since they bonded over shared experiences. And I'm gonna drink of water because my voice is starting to crack here. But yeah, that was just kind of a minor thing, but that's like there's some other results from that, but if I go over every single detail, this episode would be like 5 hours. But the gist of it is that Petra gets brought to the Empire after Brigid and Dagda lose, and that's why she is with the Empire when she goes to the Officers Academy at the start of the game. Anyway, one of the last major events, the last like super huge event of quote unquote history, before we get to the start of the game, because we haven't even gotten to the start of the game yet. And I know it's already been over an hour, and I apologize. I'll try and go quicker once I get to the game. But the tragedy of Dusker is what happens next in the year 1176. This is very important, so I'm actually gonna go into detail on this because this is a very big event. So Dusker is a small region within the borders of Fargus, like in Western Fargus, basically. It's this kind of own separate little culture. The Dusker people are have like very dark skin, like African American black kind of skin, essentially. And so that they kind of were under the protection of Fargus, but they just kind of did their own thing. I don't remember exactly the pretense for it, but basically a huge number of like important Fargus nobles were set to go to Dusker for, I think, like a conference or something, like a peace conference or something. King Lambert was among them, along with Dimitri, Dimitri's stepmother Patricia, and just a number of others. The house, like all the major houses of Fargus, so like House Blathid, House Fraldarius, House Gautier, House Galatea, House Dominique, all of them are there. And basically the fake Cornelia, along with Dimitri's uncle Rufus, Lambert's brother, and other kingdom nobles, orchestrated this massive assassination attempt at this or along the way in Dusker. This leads to the death of Lambert, King Lambert, along with a number of other nobles, including Glenn Fraldarius, the elder son of the Duke of Fraldarius, who is also the engaged husband of Ingrid Brandel Galatea, who is a character, one of the students who shows up at the Officers Academy. Anyway, that's like a major part of her backstory, and also Felix, Hugo Fraldarius, that Felix Hugo Feraldarius, who is Glenn's younger brother. It greatly affects them. So among the noble children who are present, Dimitri, Felix, Ingrid, Sylvain, Jose, Gautier, and actually I don't even know if Annette was there. I think it was just the four, but like Dimitri, Felix, Sylvain, and Ingrid, were all very close friends. They are all deeply affected by the tragedy. Along with this, a young Dusker man by the name of Dedu Molinaro would be spared by Dimitri, and as such, Dedu would basically become Dimitri's retainer and bodyguard, and like completely loyal to Dimitri. They are all heavily affected by this tragedy, the loss of Fargus's king. Patricia, Dimitri's stepmother and Edelgard's mother, would also disappear and presumably die, even though she had supposedly she had a part to play in the orchestration of this tragedy. Don't know for sure of that, but that's like hinted at. But anyway, resulting of this, outside of all the deaths, is that the Dusker people are greatly ostracized for this because they become the scapegoats for all this. Since Cornelia is able to get away with it, basically, and so the Dusker people are basically genocided by the kingdom in response. And it's this awful, terrible event that happens over the course and really like strongly affects Dimitri and a lot of his friends and the kingdom as a whole, but especially Dimitri. He's never able to forget the ghosts of those who died, and it like really affects his psyche going forward. Anyways, so a few years after that, Khalid arrives in Leicester under the name Claude von Regan. The reason why, one last little thing, is that so Claude's mother is so for the Leicester Alliance, Leicester is like made up of 5 noble houses that rule. Not like there isn't just one king. It's an alliance essentially. They rule together. House Regan is sort of like a little bit more powerful than the others, but it's not like the sole ruler. But it's still a little bit more powerful. At this point, House Regan is ruled by an elderly man. I don't know if they have like his first name or not. That's ever revealed, but like I think it's like Duke Regan essentially. He's old. He has, I think, 2 kids, a daughter and a son. His son being the like everyone's expecting his son to be the heir. His daughter, meanwhile, just kind of disappears at some point. I don't think it's like presumed dead or not, but she kind of goes off and does her own thing. At some point in time, the Duke's son, Claude's uncle, basically, he is traveling with some merchants, the parents of Raphael Kirsten, who is another student of the Leicester Alliance, or the Golden Deer House. We'll get to in very soon. But they are ambushed by monsters and are wiped out. And it's strongly hinted that the Agarthans were directly responsible for this because with the heir to House Regan dead and presumably no other heirs in sight, it would be pretty easy to destabilize the Leicester Alliance, because they've already basically, it's like we see that the Garthans have their hands in the tragedy of Dusker, the death of the heir to House Regan, and also like the Harem Rebellion, and a little bit of the insurrection of the Seven, and a lot with Edelgard. And so they've got their hands in like all 3 major factions, and like just sowing discord and chaos in all 3 of them. However, going back to House Regan, Duke Regan's daughter went over to Almyra, fell in love with the Almyran king, had a son named Khalid, Claude von Regan. He was living in Almyra at this point, just kind of living life as a prince there. He would get, after the death of his uncle, he would get recalled by his grandfather to to Lester as the heir to House Regan to stabilize and it's like prevent any more issues going on there, because it's like everyone's saying it's like they don't have an heir anymore. What's going to happen to House Regan? But actually, they do. It's Claude. He's there. And so that's like the last major event I think I'm going to cover. There's definitely plenty of other events, but this has already gone on for a lot longer than I meant to. So I'm almost gonna speed run this the actual story events. So in the year 1180, which is when the game starts, Edelgard, Dimitri, and Claude have enrolled at the Officers Academy along with a number of their friends from their territories. And so shortly before it begins outside of Romire Village, the three nobles are wandering, and they wind up getting ambushed by bandits, secretly hired by Edelgard and the Agarthans presumably to kill Dimitri and Claude. Although the bandits are not exactly the brightest bunch, they also wind up almost killing Edelgard. During this, the trio of young nobles meet up with Byleth and Geralt, while the two of them are leading their mercenaries in the village. And this is the prologue mission where Byleth teams up with the three nobles and they fight back the bandits, and Byleth gets introduced to the three house leaders. Let me just take one more sip of water here. So at the end of this, Alois, I forget his last name, but I think it's Ragnhild actually, who is a knight of Saros and Geralt's former apprentice back when Geralt was a knight. He shows up with the Knights of Saros because they're there to basically escort the three nobles. They were just a little late. He shows up and he's like, "Hey, I know you, Geralt. You were my old mentor. Why don't you come back with me?" And Geralt's like, fine. He really doesn't want to go back to the church, but he does anyway. And so him, Byleth, and Edelgard, Claude, and Dimitri, and then Alois all travel back to the church. And Rhea, who meets up with everyone, gives Geralt back his old position, sees Byleth, realizes that Byleth is Citri's child, and is like trying her best not to freak out. She offers Byleth a position as a teacher in the Officers Academy, and that is where you, the player, can choose which house you want to align with. For the first half of the story, the missions are all the same. It's except for the last one. It's just the only thing that's different is which house you take in to fight with you. So I'll go over the three houses real quick. I was going to go a bit more in depth to all the characters, but I think I'll actually save that for a different episode at this point because I'm already running a bit long. But so the Black Eagle's house is the house of the Dresden Empire. It has Edelgard von Pressfelg as its leader, her retainer Hubert von Vestra, Ferdinand von Eyre, son of the Duke von Eyre, Linhard von Hevering, Caspar von Vergles, Bernadetta von Varley, Petra McNeary, Dorothea Arnault, and I think that's everyone. Edelgard, Hubert, Ferdinand, Dorothea, Petra, Bernie, Caspar, Linhard. Yes, that's everyone, because each house has eight characters, and I'm usually pretty good at remembering. I just gotta, yeah. Anyway, so that's the Black Eagle's house. The Blue Lion's house, which represents the Kingdom of Fargus, has Dimitri Alexander Blathid, Felix Hugo Frodelaris, Sylvain Jose Gautier, Ingrid Brandel Galatea, Annette Fantine Dominique, Mercedes von Martritz, and Ash Ubert. Oh, and then also Dudu Molinaro. I almost forgot Dudu. Can't forget Dudu. He's cool. I like Dudu a lot. And then finally, the Golden Deer House has Claude von Regan, Hilda Valentine Goneril, Lysithia von Ordelia, Lawrence Halman Gloucester, I already said Lysithia, Leonie Pinelli, Marianne von Edmund, Raphael Kirsten, and Ignaz Victor. I'll almost, at this point, I'm almost certainly going to do an in-depth character review on all these characters because there's a lot I can say about all of them. But for now, I'm not going to do that. But so you can, you as the player can choose who to side with. There are 4 routes in this game, technically. Well, not technically. There are 4 routes in this game. 2 of them start, or there's one. If you choose the Black Eagles route, there is a split path at the end of the first half of the game, where you can choose to side with either Edelgard or Rhea when things come to a head. I will get to that in a second. But anyways, whichever house you choose, you get to interact with those students from the house. You can also, over the course of the first half of the game, while you're teaching at the Officers Academy as Byleth, you can recruit students from other houses to join your house, which will they will. I'll explain a little later about how that works, but basically you can grow your own house and recruit all but the other house leaders and their retainers, basically. So chapter 2 in game. So what happens next after your like first month at or Byleth? I say you because it's like you the player, but after the first month at the Officers Academy, Byleth and their house gets their first mission, which is something that happens after one where I actually skipped over one. So the first thing that actually happens is that you have a mock battle between the 3 houses. So it like gets you introduced to most of the characters, as well as some of the other professors there, and gets you gameplay wise, it's like a bit more of like wider combat stuff rather than just like it adds a bit more depth to the gameplay rather than the prologue. After that, chapter 2, which is where things get a little bit more interesting, is that you and your house go to Xanadu to investigate a disturbance there, where you actually track down the bandits from the prologue and are able to eliminate them. And that's the first one where, compared to the first chapter, it's like your characters are actually fighting to the death this time rather than just as a practice bout. So it's like it's interesting to see where you're basically leading a bunch of teenagers into battle, and like a lot of them have pretty grounded reactions to actually being forced to kill. But it's like in this world, it's like just kind of something that is a part of their life, and that's like something that's part of the Officers Academy. But after eliminating the bandits and dealing with some demonic beasts that are there, which are like monsters essentially, the chapter 3 happens, and Rhea gets word that a minor noble, Lord Lonato in the Fargus territory, is inciting his own rebellion against the Church of Saros for events that happened with the tragedy of Dusker, where basically his son was executed for his supposed involvement in the tragedy. We don't actually know for sure, but Lonato is distraught and rising up against the church to avenge his son. Ash, who is one of the students in the Blue Lion's House, had been adopted by Lonato when he was young, and was basically sent to the Officers Academy on Lonato's behalf. So if you have Ash with you, if you either recruited him by that point, or are just playing the Blue Lions, it's a very emotional journey for him. But in the end, it's you, along with some Knights of Saros, led by Catherine, who is actually a former Fargus noble named Cassandra Rubens Caron, Charon, Charon. She is now works directly under Rhea, is basically like a very zealous knight. She helps lead the charge against Lonato's forces, eventually killing the Lonato and ending the rebellion. The next chapter is after Lonato's death. Catherine's able to find notes on him that basically say that there's a suspected assassination plot coming up for Rhea at this like major event that's going to happen in the next month. So Byleth and their house has to basically run protection duty for Rhea and find out where this assassination is supposedly going to take place. they find clues that lead them to underground into the Holy Tomb, which is being robbed by Agarthans, essentially, along with the Death Knight, which is I guess I'll save the Death Knight's identity and everything that happens there for my character episode that I now am manifesting, because there's a lot more I'm going to I gotta cover character wise, because this is story wise. I'll do another one for characters, but the Death Knight is an Agarthan operative who has his own story that I will explain another time. But eventually you are able to thwart the robbery and eliminate most of the Agarthans there. One of the Agarthans is able to break into the Holy Tomb, I think expecting to find remains, because at this point it's known as the Tomb of Saros. I think they were expecting to find the remains of Saros that they were probably going to, use to create their own, like their next crest weapon, probably. I think it's actually, I think it's almost positive that's the reason why. Instead, they find the Sword of the Creator, because that's because Saros is obviously still alive. She's Rey at this point. And she had instead put the Sword of the Creator in there. And so Byleth is able to retrieve it. And because Byleth has literally the crest stone of the crest of Saros inside of them, they're able to resonate with the Sword of the Creator, because it's Sothis' bones with Zero Issue, and they now wield the Sword of the Creator with frighteningly good skill. And so when you're playing, you get a really nice weapon out of it. The Sword of the Creator is really, really nice. After that, there is the next chapter is basically another issue in Fargus territory. This time, Sylvain's older brother, Miklon, is leading his own basically bandit troop that has stolen the hero's relic of the House of Gautier. I think it's called the Lance of Ruin, I think. But so Byleth and their house goes to get rid of Miklon and his bandits and retrieve the relic on behalf of the Kingdom of Fargus. And it's, again, if you have Sylvain with you, it's a very emotional battle for him and really all of the kingdom, all of the Blue Line students. One minor thing that comes out of this is that the reason Miklon did this and turned to banditry in the first place is that he was born without a crest, despite being in the Gautier line. And so because of this, he was basically passed over by his father for Sylvain, who was born a few years after him, as the heir to House Gautier, solely because he didn't have a crest. Miklon became very bitter of this and despised both his father and Sylvain. Sylvain completely unfairly. His father rightfully so. But I mean, his actions were not justified though, where he basically becomes a murderous bandit. And so when Miklon attempts to use the Lance of Ruin against you, the power of it is way too overwhelming because he doesn't have the crest stone or a crest, a crest of Gautier in him. So it basically turns him into a demonic beast instead. So it's gameplay wise to show that only those with the crest that match the hero's relics can use those relics. And it also since at this point it's the Byleth's identity is very much a mystery. So it adds adds another clue to the mystery of who Byleth is at this point in the game, because it's very early on. Anyway, after that, chapter 6 is at that point, I believe it's Manuela, who is a professor and also the lead doctor, essentially. She runs the infirmary at the monastery. I don't know why I blanked on the name. She gets attacked by the Death Knight after the Death Knight has kidnapped Flame. And so you got to go get Flame back. And you do. You go get Flame back in the depths of the monastery while facing the Death Knight. And they also find a a student named Monica von Ox, and she was a Black Eagle student from the previous year who went missing like right before graduation and presumed dead. But they do find her, and so they take her along with Flame back, and everything seems all good. So the next chapter is this big like ceremonial battle at Gronder Field between all three houses, and it's to celebrate, I think, like the 1000th anniversary of the Battle of Gronder Field or something like that. I think, or it's like the 995th anniversary, I think, is what it is, of the Battle of Gronder Field. And it's like this. It's story wise, on its own, it doesn't have much, but it's kind of foreshadowing what happens later in the second half of the game. But yeah, it's also just a fun one where you can fight you fight against both the other two houses at once, which is kind of fun. After that is you get a distress call basically from Ramire Village, which was the village you started or where the prologue happened. And there's basically demonic beasts and bandits attacking the town, and you got to go stop them. One more drink for me here. So, leading up to this, the head librarian for Garrigmach, Tomas, gets revealed as an Agarthan agent, where he got body snatched by an Agarthan agent by Solon, like 4 or 5 years before the start of the game. And so he flees to Ramire and starts doing his own experiments out in Ramire, and you got to go stop him. So you're able to at least like send him away and stop him, though it's kind of like bad vibes all around. And so after that, the next chapter happens, and some students start to go missing, and you got to go investigate. And so in like the ruins of a town nearby, there you find some demonic beasts, and eventually you defeat the demonic beasts, but some of the surviving students reveal that I think it was like the demonic beasts were students. Anyway, it's a little like not super important. They're basically like you fight some beasts, you rescue some students with your dad Gerald, or with Byleth's dad Gerald. I say you because you're playing as Byleth, but Byleth and their dad go and with their house and rescue some students. However, Monica shows up, and she literally backstabs Gerald and kills him because Monica had also been body snatched, because the Garthans love doing it. And instead, it's actually an Agarthan agent known as Kranya. She murders Gerald in front of Byleth. Byleth attempts to rescue their dad, using some of Sothis' powers. I also completely forgot to mention something really important about Byleth now that I'm thinking about it. Anyway, let's sidetrack here. Let me go back a bit. Byleth, because they have Sothis' creststone on their heart, at the start of the game, they start getting... Basically, Sothis wakes up in their mind, or at least a child version of Sothis. So they basically have this sassy lost child talking in their mind. Sothis also, or this version of Sothis, has amnesia, basically. So, like, neither Sothis or Byleth have no idea who Sothis is. And it's a thing where, like, Byleth has this sassy lost child in their head. And they're, like, trying to figure out who the hell Sothis is. And yeah, it's a thing. Sothis can also grant Byleth powers to basically rewind time for a little bit, known as Divine Pulse. It's more of a gameplay mechanic where it's like if you mess up and one of your units dies, you can go rewind time and try it again. But anyway, yeah, I completely forgot to mention that, which is a pretty big part of Byleth's character. But anyway, Byleth attempts to rewind time and save Geralt, but Tala shows up and prevents this by basically blocking the attack. And so Geralt dies, unfortunately. Rip my man. He was cool. It's a very sad moment. I'll try not to make too much light of it, but yeah, Geralt dies. and Byleth becomes very depressed. And so the next chapter is basically Byleth's revenge, where they spend all of their energy hunting down Kranya and Solon for their roles in Geralt's death. They're able to, Byleth and their house are able to track down the two of them to a forest nearby the monastery. This is actually on purpose by Solon, where Byleth is able to confront Solon in this like platform essentially, and well, they're able to confront both Solon and Kranya, where they're able to defeat Kranya and basically push her back over to Solon. Solon then basically pulls on Mortal Kombat and rips out Kranya's heart to start this like massive magic sealing spell known as the I think it's the Sacred Realm of Zaharas or something like that. Basically, it's Solon banishes Byleth to the Shadow Realm is the best way I can describe it. Basically, just puts Byleth in a pocket dimension because Solon and the Agarthans know that Byleth it has some direct relation to Sothis, and they want to get rid of that. And so they basically just put Byleth in a pocket dimension, never to be seen again, because supposedly there's no way to get out of Zaharas. There is, though, because Byleth and Sothis have a talk. Sothis is like, well, I can get you out of here, but we need to merge, essentially. And what that really means is that Byleth basically goes Super Saiyan. Byleth at the start of the game has teal hair. When they merge with Sothis, who then basically disappears from their consciousness, Byleth gets like very, very bright green hair. So that's why I like to say they go Super Saiyan. They also get a major power boost and are able to basically use the Sword of the Creator to literally cut a rift in reality and just break out of just break out of the forbidden Shadow Realm because they can. They then kill Solon. Kranya's already dead at this point because of the whole heart rip out thing. And yeah, so Byleth is able to take their revenge and defeat both Kranya and Solon, with the side effect being that they're now merged. Their conscience is basically merged with Sothis, and they can no longer hear Sothis in their head. So the next chapter, which is the second to last chapter in the first half, and I swear I'm trying to go quick here. I swear I'm trying to go quick. We're almost there. Is basically Rhea asks Byleth to come with them down to this hidden mausoleum almost under the monastery, and it's this like giant like throne, it's more of a chair, I'd say, with a bunch of steps leading up to it, and it's very familiar because it's like anytime you see Sothis in Byleth's mind, it is that throne that Sothis is sitting on. So it's now you see the actual thing, and basically what Rhea is trying to do is that there's this ritual that she performs where she is basically trying to get Sothis to manifest within Byleth, because that's like what all of her attempts to resurrect her mother are leading to. She tries to do this, and I think it would have worked had Byleth not just merged with Sothis like the month before with the whole Shadow Realm thing. It doesn't work this time, and Rhea's like absolutely devastated. And then things go from bad to worse for her because the Flame Emperor, which is Edelgard's like secret identity that she uses when she's working with the Agarthans. Because I should mention that Edelgard at this point is working reluctantly with the Agarthans to overthrow the church. She has the identity of the Flame Emperor, which is this like masked individual. And they're like waging a shadow war against the church. So Edelgard, under the guise of the Flame Emperor, shows up with some of her Imperial forces to basically raid the entire mausoleum of all the crest stones there. I think it's like all the crest stones of the 10 elites are stored there. And so she tries to steal all of them. And so that mission is to fight against the Flame Emperor, and eventually it gets revealed at the end that the Flame Emperor is Edelgard. And the cutscene happens where Dimitri is there when that happens, and he literally goes insane. Like, just completely snaps and goes insane. It's not good. Dimitri is also, because of his crest, he is like uber strong, like inhumanly strong. And when he snaps and goes insane, he literally crushes a man's skull in his helmet with his bare hands. Like, and he is also at this point, I think, like 19 years old. So it's not like he is a fully grown adult. Like, he is, he's still a teenager, and he's doing that. Which is, yeah, it's a little scary. Anyway, after the end of this mission, one key specific event can happen where, if you're playing the Black Eagles route, this is where the split path happens, where a couple missions before, if you have a high enough support with Edelgard, Byleth can choose, or well, you as Byleth can choose to go with her back to Adrestia, where and witness Edelgard basically usurp her own father and proclaim herself as Emperor of Adrestia. If you do this, you have the option to then side with Edelgard in the holy. It might be the Holy Tomb, it might be the Mausoleum. I don't remember exactly, but you can choose to side with Edelgard after the end of this mission, or you can choose to side with Rhea. But that's only if you are in the Black Eagles path. If you choose to side with Rhea, the next mission, you will go on the defensive against the invading Adrestian army, which is the same if you are doing the Blue Lions or Golden Deer path. So it's the church path, which is known as Silver Snow, that's known as the route. So the church path, the Golden Deer and Blue Lions path, you side with the church against the Empire and fight them on the defensive in the next mission. If you choose to side with Edelgard in the Black Eagles path, you instead go with Edelgard and fight against Rhea in the final battle of the first half at the footsteps of the monastery. At the end of that battle, Rhea transforms into her dragon form, known as the Immaculate One, doing battle and turning the tide, essentially, for the church. And she would do battle with Agarthan forces who show up to support the Empire, and including Talus himself. Eventually, Talus and Rhea would do battle with Byleth kind of caught in between, and they would basically just get launched into a nearby chasm, presumably falling to their death. They don't actually, but they fall and disappear, while Rhea basically they're able to, well, for the three defense paths, Rhea and her forces are able to repel the Empire to a degree where the monastery is not taken over, though it's more both sides just suffered heavy losses. Though if you are on the attacking side, the Imperial forces are able to take over the monastery, though Rhea is able to escape. So that is the end of the first half. The second half is a little shorter and a bit more easy to run down, essentially. And there is a 5-year time skip, essentially, while Byleth is basically unconscious in the bottom of the canyon. The universal things that happen over this 5-year time skip is that so Edelgard officially has declared war on the church, and by extension, she has also declared war on both Vargas and Leicester. And so, what? Okay, sorry, I apologize. I'm looking at the wiki to try and refresh myself, and okay, I just completely lost my place there. So, during the 5-year time skip, Claude returns to the Alliance, and he basically takes over the Alliance as its like leader and head tactician. The Alliance also kind of fractures between Claude's pro-church faction and the pro Empire faction led by House Gloucester and Lawrence, and also his dad. Um, Meanwhile, in the so little annoying thing about this is that events of the Crimson Flower route, which is the one where you side with Edelgard, they have different story events. I think I'm actually going to go just run down each route individually rather than try and do all the events at once per like year. So I'm going to do I'll just do the routes individually. So I'm going to start with the Silver Snow route, which is the one where you had chosen the Black Eagle's house, but then sided with Rhea instead of Edelgard. Doing this, Edelgard and Hubert will leave you permanently. They will side against you, but the rest of the students from the Black Eagle's house will side with you. So this is the quote unquote church route, where you're siding more directly with the Church of Saros. So during the 5-year time skip, Rhea is captured by the Empire and held captive. The Knights of Saros all scatter about Fodlan to try and find her, as well as Byleth, but they're not able to find either of them during the 5-year time period. Over in the kingdom, the Holy Kingdom of Fargus, Cornelia seizes the moment to usurp control. She murders Rufus, the brother of the late King Lambert, and Dimitri's uncle. She then pins the blame of this murder on Dimitri, which gives her pretense to arrest the prince, who is gradually growing more and more insane with each passing minute. Let me just take another sip here. And with Dimitri's arrest, she proclaims the Holy Kingdom of Fargus instead as the Fargus Dukedom, which is basically a puppet state of the Empire, since the Empire is at this point, while it's run by Edelgard, it's also kind of controlled by the Agarthans. It's more of like both sides believe they're in control, essentially, but the Agarthans' base of power is with the Empire at this point. And so Cornelia, as an Agarthan agent, is bringing the Fargus territories into Adrestian control to further solidify the Agarthan control over Fodlan. Only House Blathid and Gautier are able, and also, and to a lesser extent, Fraldarius are able to really resist the turn into the dukedom, although they are not able to do much other than really just fend for themselves and survive over this 5-year period. Edelgard is able to control, like, over this time period, control most of Fargus, all of Adrestia, and kind of run a stalemate with Leicester, while solidifying her control over the Empire. So that's kind of what happens in the meantime of the 5-year time skip. And that's true for Silver Snow, the Azure Moon route, which is the Blue Lion's house, and the Verdant Wind, which is the Golden Deer route. That is the same events that happen in the time skip for all 3 of those routes. For Silver Snow, once the time skip is up, Byleth awakens to the sound of Sothis' voice, but we never see her again, which I think is kind of a missed opportunity. I would have liked to have seen more of Sothis in the second half of the story, but it didn't end up happening. But either way, Byleth wakes up in nearby the ruins of Garrick Mach Monastery, which is, since the Church of Saros is kind of under siege and Rhea is missing and the knights are scattered about, the monastery's kind of been abandoned. And so Byleth returns to the monastery, and one thing that is true through all 4 routes is that Byleth and their students promise that in 5 years they will return to the monastery for the big reunion, because it's like the 1000th year of the monastery's opening that year. So it's like they all made a promise to come back and reunite with each other no matter what happens. And so in the first mission in the post-time skip for all 3, for Silver Snow, Azure Moon, and Verdant Wind, it's the same, where you go to the monastery and recruit with the house students that you are with. For Silver Snow, you reunite with the Black Eagle students minus Edelgard and Hubert. You also reunite with Sedith and Flane because they're they fill in for you there as well. And so Byleth and their forces are able to defeat some bandits who are plundering loot in the monastery there, and they reestablish control of the monastery as their base of operations. So next up is after that, Byleth and the others are trying to reestablish control and figure out their next moves. And so their next move is actually to run defense because the Adrestian Empire gets word that that Byleth and the church are back, so they try and go stomp them out immediately. Byleth is able to repel the attack and fully establish themselves as a major threat to the Empire at this point. Next up, they do need to source for allies, so Byleth goes looking for allies in both the mainly the Alliance, and so they go to travel through the Valley of Aelel, the Valley of Torment, to try and get to the Alliance, because or basically just to get to Alliance territory and meet up with Alliance forces. They're ambushed by Kingdom forces loyal to the dukedom, though they are able to repel them, and eventually meet up with some Alliance forces, though the truce they have with Claude and his forces is shaky at best. They are able to, at that point, align themselves to a point where Claude and Byleth are able to devise a plan where they're going to go seize control over the rest of Alliance territory and march into Adrestia over the Great Bridge of Murden, which is this massive fortress bridge that crosses over the Aramid River on that southern Leicester territory with Adrestia. So they do that. They're able to beat back the Alliance forces that are allied with the Empire, and the Alliance gains full control of their territory, and the combined Alliance and Church army starts marching into Imperial territory. So one of my issues with Silver Snow is that it's just a worse version of the Verdant Wind route. And so one of the major battles, which is the reunion at Gronder Field, which is this three-way battle between the three houses, doesn't happen in the Silver Snow route. It just gets skipped over for some unknown reason. I get that you're not aligned with any of the three houses specifically, but it's very frustrating that this gets skipped over. They also, because of this, completely off-screen Dimitri's entire character arc in the post-time skip, where he shows up and dies off-screen during that battle, during the Silver Snow route, which is really dumb. And so, it's just Dimitri, he's here and then he's not. But it's this massive three-way battle that happens off-screen between the Alliance, Empire, and Holy Kingdom, which heavily depletes all three of their forces. Meanwhile, Byleth and the Church forces go to have a different attack where they attack a major Imperial fortress, which is defended by the Death Knight, known as Fort Mercius, and they're able to take it down and then start attacking into Adrestian territory itself. They eventually go into Enbar, which is the capital, and they're able to fight through the city streets and take down both the Death Knight and Hubert. Before, in the previous chapter, at the end of it, after the Church forces take over Mercius, Fort Mercius, the Agarthans launched one of their javelins of light, the magic ICBMs, to wipe out the fortress altogether. And because of this, Hubert, who working for Edelgard, whoa, jeez, voice crack. Hubert, working for Edelgard, is able to trace the magic of that javelin of light back to Shambhala, so he knows where the Agarthans lurk. Since him and Edelgard are not like, they don't like the Agarthans, they're just using them as a means to an end. And so after you kill Hubert in your assault on Enbar, his like basically a thing he had planned for in his death is that he would send a note to Byleth and the church forces saying like, hey, here's where the Agarthans are. Once you're done with all this, go get them. Go get them, Tiger, basically. We don't want them, and you don't want them either. So that sets up for 2 chapters ahead. The next chapter is you confronting Edelgard. One more sips because my voice is starting to crack again. But yeah, the chapter 19 basically is you fight Edelgard in her throne room and eventually defeat and kill the Empress, ending the war basically. And it's this big dramatic moment, but I'm kind of going over it quickly, A, because of time, and B, because this happens in multiple routes. But yeah, with basically the Edelgard's dead, the Empire is defeated. Next stop is Shambhala, which is the underground lair of the Agarthans. With Hubert's help, the Byleth and the crew are able to find it. They go and assault Shambhala along with Talus and all of his forces. And so you also get some of Rhea's help, and you're able to take down most of the Agarthans. Eventually, Talus, in a last-ditch effort, launches a Javelin of Light on Shambhala itself in an attempt to basically bring everyone down with him. Rhea transforms into her dragon form and intercepts the Javelin of Light, but it nearly kills her because of it. She survives, but is not in a good state. And with all the destruction of Shambhala, Talus dies in the ensuing chaos, and the Agarthan threat is purged for good. And so the last chapter of Silver Snow is one where it was kind of convoluted, or not convoluted, but it's like just kind of thrown together because they needed a way to end it. And I'm not the biggest fan of it, but basically after Rhea's interception of the ICBM, it's like basically explained that she just kind of goes mad with like delirium. Like she's in like so much pain and like so much, like her energy's been drained so much. And basically she just goes crazy at Garrick Mach, and it's your job to go defeat her. And so it's actually a really tough mission, where like she sends endless waves of troops at you, and it's pretty tough. And Rhea herself in her dragon form is really, really tough. But eventually you do defeat her, and basically it's, unless you as Byleth are able to as supporter, where it's basically you develop a really good bond with Rhea in the first half of the game, Rhea will die from her wounds at the end of the route. If you do S support her, she will live, but if not, she will pass away. And that's the end of it, where basically at the end of Silver Snow, I think Byleth is crowned Archbishop. I think like all the territory basically just gets absorbed into the church, and like all of Fodlan becomes like this church state essentially, with Byleth at the helm, and like with Seteth and Flayn and those who survived helping advise her essentially. So that is the first route. The next route I'll do is Azure Moon, the Blue Lions route. So after the reunion at dawn, which is where Byleth awakens, goes back to monastery. There they actually meet. I'm saying she because I played as female Byleth more recently in my latest playthrough of Three Houses rather than male Byleth. So that's why I have female Byleth on my mind. But so Byleth meets with Dimitri, who is like basically just insane at this point. Like he's seeing ghosts. He's Sam Darnold. He's seeing ghosts. He's basically lived as a hermit in the monastery for like a good while. He basically, him and Dedu broke out of prison at some point, and he basically made his way directly to Garrick Mach and basically just lived there presumably waiting for Byleth to return with his like 1 degree of sanity left. And so eventually during that first mission, all the other students show up and the Blue Lion's house gets reunited. So next up is similar to the second mission in the Silver Snow route. You got to defend against a Adrestian assault. It's also pretty similar for the Verdant Wind route as well. And yeah, so it's the your forces are able to repel the alliance threat, or not alliance threat, the Adrestian threat, and establish Garrick Mach as the main base of operations for the Holy Kingdom. After that is similar again. A lot the three Silver Snow, Azure Moon, and Verdant Wind have pretty similar missions, where like especially in the first like 3 or 4, basically in this first 3 you do your reunion at the monastery, your defense of the monastery, then you go to ALL to try and go to Alliance territory to get more help. And so it's the same thing that happens in Silver Snow happens in Azure Moon and Verdant Wind, with some like minor differences in terms of like story beats and what happens. After that, with the kingdom, you're able to align with the with Claude and the Alliance to go retake the Great Bridge of Murden. So it's the same thing that happens there, and make your way into Alliance or into Adrestian territory because of it. After that is the battle at Gronder Field, which actually happens now since you're in command of the Blue Lion's house, and that's a very fun mission where you fight. It's a little convoluted for like why you need to fight Claude in the Alliance, but it's mainly more fighting against Edelgard, and eventually you're able to win the battle and really establish yourself or the kingdom's able to establish themselves as a major threat. One key event that happens here for the kingdom specifically is that Dimitri, who is still kind of insane at this point, he is nearly assassinated by I think the niece of an imperial general who Dimitri had killed in the second mission post time skip, the defense mission, where she was basically the niece she named Fleisch. She was basically like biding her time, acting as like an innocent like girl who gets rescued, and then is basically biding her time to try and kill Dimitri to avenge her brother, or I think it's her brother. I don't remember exactly, but like she tries to do that instead. Rodrigue, Felix's father, and basically Dimitri's like uncle and all but name, basically, I would say, and like steward almost. He steps in front of the blade that was intended for Dimitri and dies because of it. This kind of snaps Dimitri out of his like insane barbaric rage, and since he's like realizes what his rage has cost him, and because of it, he becomes much more clear in terms of his sanity and mind. It's this big like character moment. I'll go more into that in my character overview, but that's like a big thing that happens in this version of the Battle of Gronder Field specifically. After that, instead of pressing their advantage against the Empire, the kingdom forces instead go to the fortress of Aryan Road, which is this massive kingdom fortress that is located in the southern half of the kingdom, which is in control of the dukedom under Cornelia's control. Cornelia is able to, or the Byleth and Dimitri and their forces are able to kill Cornelia and completely solidify control of the kingdom under Dimitri's rule. Now that he is like he's very much a king at this point, and like he's clear in his mind and he knows what he's doing, um, and he's able to avenge the tragedy of Dusker by killing Cornelia, well, the fake Cornelia, and yeah, it's the chapter is called "The King's Triumphant Return," so you can kind of understand what's going on there. After that, they get a message from Claude and the Golden Deer that they're under attack by a combination of Imperial and Agarthan forces led by Lord Arundel, who again is Talus at this point. So Byleth and the gang goes over to Deirdre, which is the Alliance capital, and rescues Claude and the Alliance and kills Arundel. And one thing that is kind of interesting about this and kind of an odd choice is that and Arundel never actually reveals himself to be Talus in this route. It's just like he's just always Arundel. So like my friend Danica, who if you've listened to my the episode where we talk about the Nintendo Direct, she had only played the Blue Lions route, and so like she didn't know that Arundel and Talus were the same person. Which is like if you play the other routes, it's like it. I don't think it's like ever like officially revealed. It might be. I don't remember exactly, but like it's pretty easy to piece together. But it's like for a pretty major lore or like pretty major part of his character, the fact that it's like never really revealed in the Blue Lions route is like it's kind of weird. And it's like he's a major player in the overall story and also in the story for like Dimitri and the kingdom specifically. And they kill Arundel, but it's like there's no fanfare to it, and there's no real like big reveal of like, oh yeah, Arundel is Talus and Talus is like behind the tragedy of Dusker and like a ton of things. It's just like, oh, he's like an imperial noble and he's dead. Okay, on to the next one. It's just an odd, like it was an odd design choice anyway. And so the last three missions for the Blue Lions route are pretty similar to the three assault on the Empire missions from Silver Snow, where it's you fight Fort Mercius and you take it over. I think that time it doesn't get destroyed by a Javelin of Light. Well, it actually makes sense that it doesn't because Talus is dead at this point, so he doesn't have the ability to nuke it with his ICBM. But yeah, you take Fort Mercius, then you go into Enbar, you march through the city of Enbar, take down Hubert, and then the final chapter is you fight Edelgard. This Edelgard is a little different. I don't remember exactly why, but she basically turns into this weird like monster, like I don't even remember what they call it, but it's this like weird monstrous version of Edelgard that's like not even her anymore, but it's like super powerful. And it's this big climactic showdown between Dimitri and Edelgard, eventually ending with in a cutscene, Dimitri offers a hand to Edelgard, offering to spare her life. Edelgard instead takes a dagger that Dimitri had gifted to her when they were kids, back when Edelgard was in exile in Fargus, and she tries to kill Dimitri with it. And she's able to throw it into his shoulder, but Dimitri tanks the blow and he kills Edelgard with his spear. And it's this like pretty somber, like not very triumphant, but like still just it's like the conflict has been resolved at this point. And it's at that point like Dimitri, who for much of his character has been trying to get revenge on Edelgard, like when he was more insane. At this point, now that he's a lot more clear in his life, he doesn't have much of a desire for revenge at this point, and it's just like killing Edelgard isn't like something he takes pleasure in or even like really wants to do, but it's just something he winds up having to do. And it's a nice moment for like his character and like the climax of that story. But it's something I can go into a bit more for my character analysis. So next up is the Verdant Wind route, and I swear I'm almost done. I've just got this and the Crimson Flower route, and luckily the Crimson Flower route is really short. So the Verdant Wind route, again, the first three chapters, actually, well, really the first four chapters are all pretty much the same, where it's you get your reunion at dawn, where instead of meeting Dimitri, you meet Byleth meets Claude, who's chilling at the monastery. He is not insane. He's doing fine. Claude's doing pretty nice. He has a chin strap beard though, and I don't really like his chin strap beard in his post time skip design. Not gonna lie, but anyway. So they meet up with Claude. They meet up with the rest of the students when they take down the bandits. They then defend against the Adrestian assault. The next chapter, they then go through the Valley of Torment to get back into Alliance territory and fend off the Dukedom forces. Then after that, after reestablishing control in Alliance territory, they go and seize control over the Great Bridge of Murden and realign Alliance forces all into one. After that, they cross through, and it's the three-way battle between Edelgard, Claude, and Dimitri. This one makes more sense when you're battling against all three factions, because at this point, Dimitri's still in his insane, he's still insane at this point, and he doesn't have Byleth to guide him. So it makes a lot more sense where like he's just there to fight literally anyone and everyone. And at that point, after that, I believe it's Dimitri where like because all three forces are like really depleted after that battle. He tries charging after Edelgard anyway, but he dies in the attempt essentially. So it's another one where it's kind of off screen. It's like you get a sort of in-game cutscene to show that he dies, where it's like it's a little bit better than Silver Snow, where you just get a line of dialogue of another character saying that Dimitri dies. Whereas in Verdant Wind, it's more you see that he dies. It's still not like great, but it's better than the other option. So after that, Claude does some more scheming. Claude's a big schemer essentially, and so they go fight Fort Mercius. This is their invasion of Fort Mercius. Claude calls in some allies from Elmira to help out. And they're able to take down Fort Mercius. And like with Silver Snow, Talus calls in his magic ICBM to wipe out the fortress so no one can have it. Basically, just to make sure the Alliance doesn't have it and use it as a staging ground in the Imperial territory. After that, it's the next two chapters it's like this chapter along with the next two are the same as the others, where it's you go Mercius assault, then the assault in Enbar, and then the fight against Edelgard in her throne room. This one as well, Hubert is able to, before he dies, is able to track the location of Shambhala using magic. And so it's the same with Silver Snow. That's what I'm saying. Like Silver Snow and Verdant Wind are very similar in terms of like how like the actual missions themselves, but a lot of the story behind them is, or like a lot of the character moments behind them, I'd say, is a bit different for like how it's framed, I should say. Verdant Wind also has the extra chapter of the three-way battle, whereas Silver Snow does not. After that, so after you defeat Hubert, and then after Byleth and the Alliance forces go in and defeat Edelgard and kill her, they then go to Shambhala, take down Talus and all that. I think in that one, Rhea might tank the ICBM hit. I forget exactly, but she basically becomes a non-factor in the story after that. She has a big lore dump after or like either before or right after, because you're able to rescue her from the Empire after Edelgard is defeated. And so she explains to Byleth and Claude a lot of the history of Fodlan, what I covered in the first half of this episode. And so that's where a lot of the lore dump comes from. And so anyway, after Talus and the Agarthans are defeated, it seems like all is good. But one last little twist happens. And this is one where it does kind of come out of nowhere, but I think it's really fun. So the Agarthans were either creating a zombified or like a cloned or just a resurrection version of Nemesis himself, along with the 10 elites. And so he awakens and along with his 10 elites, takes his own like forces along with the remnants of the Agarthans and just goes on an absolute warpath across Fodlan. And so it's up to you and the Alliance to go stop him in a really really fun final battle with the best song ever, God Shattering Star. And just it's such I think it's probably the best ending to Three Houses, where it's like it's the new generation taking like finally excising a blight on history, where you take down Fodlan and the or not Fod, you take down Nemesis and the Ten Elites for good, quite literally with the power of friendship. Like Claude is in the final cutscene where Claude and Byleth are fighting together. Like I don't think he says the power of friendship specifically, but he's like basically using more words to basically describe the power of friendship, and it's kind of cheesy but kind of funny in the same way. And it's a really fun little ending where it's like kind of out of left field, but also kind of fun, where it's you're taking on the strongest fighters from history, from Fodlan's jagged history, and defeating them to launch Fodlan into a new age. And so after it's done, Byleth becomes the Archbishop of the Church, and Claude goes back to Elmira to become king, but they still stay in touch, and it's it's world peace and all that. Same with Blue Lions. I think Byleth becomes the Archbishop of the Church there as well. Dimitri becomes king of a unified Fodlan, and mostly unified Fodlan, and all's well. It's like all four of the routes have like good endings for relative to the story, but it's like not everything. There's no golden route, I'd say. Anyway, the final route, the Crimson Flower route, is where if you side with Edelgard instead of Rhea at the end of the first part. And there's a little bit of lore deviation compared to in the 5-year time skip compared to the other three routes. And so it's essentially where after Byleth falls into the chasm, the Imperial forces are able to take over Garreg Mach and use it as a staging ground for their future war. Rhea does not get kidnapped. Instead, she flees to the Holy Kingdom, and also starts going insane because of Byleth's portrayal of her, because basically she sees her mother in Byleth, like quite literally, and her mother has now betrayed her for Edelgard, who is working with the people who have massacred her family. So, Rhea is kind of going insane at this point because of that. And so she goes back to like the one place that is still aligned with the church, which is the Holy Kingdom. Dimitri follows her as well, grants her amnesty, and is willing to align the Holy Kingdom directly with the church to fight against Edelgard. Whereas Claude, he kind of remains neutral, but like he doesn't side with the the alliance stuff kind of remains the same. And the war is more directly between the Empire and the Kingdom, to a lesser extent the Alliance. Dimitri at this point, it's interesting where like he isn't really as nearly as insane. It's more the insane one is more Rhea in this case rather than Dimitri. But so he's kind of leading the Holy Kingdom's forces, while Rhea leads the Church of Sarah's forces as sort of like a special force. And so Crimson Flower is a bit shorter. One last sip of water here. But so after Byleth wakes up and they return to the monastery, they find that the monastery is basically this forward operating base used by Edelgard and the rest of the Black Eagle students. And so they eagerly welcome Byleth back in the fold, and they got to go win the war real quick. So it's compared to the others, you don't have any mission in the monastery where you're raiding it or removing all the bandits and then defending it from the Imperial counterattack, because there's no need for it in either case. You just like immediately skip over to fighting on the Great Bridge of Murden, although in this time, instead of going from Alliance territory into Adrestia, you're doing the other way around, where you're going from Adrestian territory into the Alliance territory. And so Byleth, Edelgard, and their forces do that, taking down Alliance forces along the way. They then march up into Deirdre, the capital of the Alliance, and take down Claude and his forces, where you can choose to either kill or spare Claude. If you choose to spare Claude, he will flee back to Elmira, not to be seen again in the story, presumably just to go become king there and just live his own life out over there, essentially. But so after that, after removing the Alliance as a threat, Byleth and the Imperial forces return to Garreg Mach, which is then besieged by church forces led by Sedith and Flayn, along with the rest of the Knights of Saros. And you're able to, Byleth and their forces are able to repel the attack, and Sedith and Flayn can die. They can also live in the attack, depending on how you go about it. But either way, they get defeated, and if they're spared, they basically, the two of them basically go off to go live their lives in solitude, not to oppose the Empire anymore. Basically, it's like either way, they're no longer a part of the story. After that, Edelgard starts moving forward with her plans to get rid of the Agarthan presence, and also the Holy Kingdom. So she and Byleth and their forces all go and besiege Aryan Road, which is again the massive kingdom fortress on near the border with Adrestia, and it is being run by Cornelia and Rodrigue. Rodrigue is the Felix's dad, and Dimitri Stewart, who dies in the Azure Moon route. And so in Crimson Flower, when you besiege Aryan Road, Byleth, Edelgard, and their forces are able to kill Cornelia and Rodrigue, along with any of the other forces there. This angers the Agarthans, but they're not able to do much about it. And so after that, the Imperial forces march onto the Tailtean Plains to do one last battle with Dimitri and his kingdom forces, where Dimitri himself, along with most of the kingdom forces, are slain by Edelgard and her forces. And so it's a bit of, reverse tragedy there, where it's like you have in the end of the Azure Moon route, it's Dimitri standing tall over kneeling Edelgard as he kills her. And then in this route, it's Edelgard standing tall over Dimitri, killing him. Neither one wanting to really do it, but it's more that they have to do it. And then the final mission is in Ferdiad, which is the capital of the Holy Kingdom of Fargus. Rhea has barricaded herself along with the remnants of the kingdom and church forces, and she is going like completely insane at this point, like utterly insane. Literally sets fire to the entire city just to try and take Edelgard and her forces down with her. But eventually Byleth and Edelgard are able to take down Rhea, who transforms into her dragon form, but doesn't end up helping her. And Byleth and Rhea are able to slay the beast and take down Rhea for good, ending the system as a whole. As a side effect, for some reason, I don't really know why this is a thing, but it happens, is that the crest stone inside Byleth, so if this is crest stone, shatters after Rhea dies. This is a thing that only happens in the Crimson Flower route, but Byleth actually has their heartbeat for the first time, and it's Rhea who has developed a close, or not Rhea, Edelgard, who has developed a close bond with Byleth, is very happy to hear. And so in the epilogue, the narrated epilogue for the Crimson Flower route, Edelgard establishes a new system in Fodlan that is more merit based rather than based on one's birth. She kind of eliminates the nobility, which is what she had set out to do. And she also is able to wipe out the Agarthans with the help of Byleth and Hubert at some point during the epilogue, which I'm a little miffed that it's you don't get to do it in game, you don't get to go to Shambhala after at some point, but it's whatever. It's I think the Crimson Flower Root was like developed last and like really rushed compared to the other three, and that's why it's like so short compared to the others. But yeah, that's kind of the history of that's the story of Three Houses. I apologize for how kind of rushed the second half was. I was not planning on the first half taking as long as it was, but it's just kind of how it ended up being. I definitely did not cover everything. There's an entire DLC story that happens during the first half of the main story that happens. That's not really relevant to the overall plot, but it's something else that happens. I might do that when I do my character analysis. I might do that because I didn't really mention any of the Ashen Wolves, but that's another thing. But yeah, it's. I hope that you listening at home were able to follow this because I think it went well. I think it probably I might have been able to do it better, but ultimately I think I'm satisfied with how this went. And there's just such a bulky story, and there's so much more like little bits I could certainly go in, especially in like the specific missions, um, like stuff that happens in between the missions themselves. There's plenty of like little character bits and like little story tidbits that I could mention, but again, that would probably make this episode like 6 hours, and that's just something that doesn't need to happen. This episode's already too long, and but it's yeah, it just shows the bulk of like the content that is within Three Houses as a whole, and why I really like it. It's a story that is not really told in Fire Emblem all that much, and like for Rhea's motivations throughout her entire character arc and throughout the story, mainly like wanting to preserve the systems of old and like like creating the nobility system around crests and keeping humanity from advancing technologically and all that, and creating the Church of Saros as like this dominant religion, and more that's what's more expanded in Warriors Three Hopes is a very closed border society for Fodlan. I don't think it's mentioned too much in Three Houses. That's more of a Three Hopes thing, but it's like her policies are very controversial in the eyes of the fandom, and even in the in the universe itself, like in Three Houses itself, it's very controversial. And so it's like her motivations along with Edelgard's desires, where like she wants to burn down that whole system and create her own system. Problem is like a lot of her views are kind of like she's only getting half the story, and like a lot of her anger is kind of misplaced almost. Like she gets a burning hatred for the Church of Saros when it really should be for the Agarthans. But so it's a lot of the like you can hear the word discourse a lot when it comes to the Three Houses fandom and the Three Houses story, and it's a lot of like who was right, Edelgard or Rhea, like which side do you go on? For me personally, so I'm a fan of the Golden Deer the most. That's like my house that I choose. It was not the first one I chose. I actually chose Black Eagles first, but I am more of a fan of the Golden Deer. I lean more towards Rhea and her side rather than Edelgard, but both sides have their merits, and both sides have their demerits, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing that there's like both major sides in the war that happens have like kind of gray morality, and so it's like there's valid points to siding with either of them, and I think it's like a big reason why discourse amongst the fandom still happens to this day. Like we've had an entire separate game. We've had Fire Emblem Engage come out, go through its entire life cycle, and basically just end discourse wise. And in the entire like in the span of like 3 years, and Three Houses discourse is still going on while Engage has like come and gone basically. It's crazy. And now with Fortune's Weave coming out next year, we're probably going to get even more discourse. It's just never going to end. But anyway, it's again, I hope this was as coherent as it sounded in my head as I was talking through. It's such a fascinating set of lore and story that I just really wanted to talk about it. So wrapping this up, next episode is going to be my week 6 recap for the NFL. I'm really excited to talk about that Thursday night game because oh boy, the Eagles lost, and oh boy, they lost bad. But I will save that for next episode. Um, Thank you very much for sticking through this way too long of an episode. I will try and not have my character analysis on Three Houses be nearly this long. I apologize. But if you did listen to this long, thank you very much. And I hope you listen to tune in again. Thank you very much for listening.